note of stuff in.
Hello.
Hello. Oh,
It is wonderful to be part of the Women at Warp's IDIC podcast festival. Yeah, we are so jazzed to be here. Thank you for joining the stream. Thank you to Women at Warp for hosting such an amazing idea. So excited for it. Better introduce ourselves. I'm Eli. My pronouns are he, him, his. And my wonderful co-host is...
My name is Jinx. My pronouns are he and they. And
we're from the Out of Orbit podcast. Yeah, better introduce our podcast as well.
Oh, yeah, that's important.
Yeah, and on Out of Orbit, if you're not familiar with us, we just have fun talking about anything in Star Trek that we're interested in, that we have an issue with. Yeah, we have fun. Very laid back, very chaotic.
Yeah. Never taken ourselves too seriously.
Brilliant. So Jinx, would you like to introduce the topic for today?
Absolutely. The topic of today, which is part of our ongoing series that we have on our podcast right now called Star Trek Misfits. We are covering Kai Winn.
Yes, everyone's favorite Kai Winn. Yeah, so Kai Winn, for those who don't know or would like a refresher, is a character from Star Trek Deep Space Nine. And she is played by Louise Fletcher, who is an amazing actress. First and foremost, I just want to give credit to how absolutely amazing. Yeah, she's been in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Flowers in the Attic, tons. Yeah, incredible actress. Do you want to give a rundown of who Kai Winn is as a character and who she is in DS9?
Yeah, absolutely. But first, before we get into that, I just wanted to talk about how she was in Flowers in the Attic. Ooh. I didn't know that when I watched it. My friend was like, "Hey, there's this movie that I watched way too young." First off, it's not a great concerning content. It's not a fantastic film. Good film. Anyway, but she plays the grandmother in that movie, and I was watching this grandmother walk around and talk the way that she did,
so distinctive.
Yeah, and I was like, I know her. I looked her up and I was like, that's Kai Winn. And they're like,
and then
they're
once
so
it
similar.
Clicks, yeah, you can't unsee them anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I will be watching something and be like, that's Kai Winn. That's
Kai
not
Winn.
Louise Fletcher. That's Kai Winn.
But yeah, gosh, I keep bumping my desk. Sorry. But Kai Winn is one of our more common villains that you see a lot of the time in Deep Space Nine. She's in 14 episodes of the series, including pretty much the entire finale arc.
Yes, she was very central to that whole shebang.
Mm-hmm. I couldn't remember if it was all of them or if she wasn't in the first one or two. But she is a religious leader on Bajor and worships the prophets, who some people would call the wormhole aliens. And like, I love the way that she talks.
She has such a presence.
She has this way of speaking that she'll say anything with a smile, even if it's like some of the worst things you've ever heard.
I think that's what makes her such like a memorable character. I mean, as Anne-Marie, hello, has just said, only 14 episodes, but she's so pervasive. And I mean, again, not to harp on about Louise Fletcher, but I think that is completely down to that amazing acting. Like, I didn't realize it was only 14 episodes. In my mind, she was a lot more central.
Yeah.
And just the impact that not only Fletcher's amazing acting, but Kai Winn's storyline in general is so deeply linked to the ending of DS9. It feels strange she was only there for a bit. Like, I thought she and Ducat had pretty much the same amount of episodes, give or take, but no, she has less than half. She has 14 while Ducat has 35 episodes. Whoa.
Yeah. It's like a huge jump.
Yeah.
But sorry.
No.
I'm trying to get to a good part in our little Google Doc. But she, like, between the religious aspect of her ambition, her sarcasm, like, at first, when I first watched DS9, I didn't like her. And I mean, she's a villain. I don't think you're supposed to like her, but I like Ducat. So it's like, don't look at me like that.
I am wearing a shirt with Ms. Kira punching Ducat in the face right now.
I was trying to figure out what that was. But it's like, I liked Ducat and I didn't like her. But going back through this and rewatching some of the stuff that she does and the way that she talks, and like you said, her acting and her ambition, it was very just, it made me like her more the second time rather than the first time. I think the finale also helps with that too. Like, the way that they treated her.
It really comes down to that age-old thing of, like, just because a character is, serving as a villain in a plotline doesn't make them a bad character in terms of their development or their impact on the series. And I was definitely the same. I didn't really appreciate Kai Winn as a character. She was there.
Yeah.
I didn't like her because she was a villain. I didn't really have deep critical thinking about it. But taking this time to reflect on it, like, a really interesting character, and I think a lot more three-dimensional than we perhaps give her credit, which can be true of many villains, especially in Star Trek. But she is a lot more interesting than she appears on the surface. So, shall we do like a little rundown of some of her most memorable episodes? Or
sure. Like, do you just want me to name off some of the episodes I have here?
Yeah, well, a whistle-stop tour of, like, what role she plays.
Well, the ones that I actually most recently rewatched were pretty much the season 2 beginning arc, episode 2 and episode 3, The Circle and the Siege. The Siege was really interesting to me. I think that was the one that she does this in. No, it was The Circle. When the guy that's doing the whole coup thing, Jaro, comes to her in the like temple, she's almost like immediately interested in his offer of like, hey, you publicly say that the prophets are with me and I should be the new leader of Bajor, and I'll be able to get you something in return. And she's immediately like, I can, but you pretty much have to make me Kai so that we're both ruling together. And she does not like, she does beat around the bush a little bit because that's just how she does things. But it was just like, she was like, I want to be exactly where you are because I know you have the power to do that for me. And the way that conversation kind of went also kind of reminded me of when she and Dukat start working together. I consider it a little bit of manipulation, but
oh, well, yeah. I mean,
but it kind of felt like they pulled a little bit from that conversation and put it into the whole Dukat Kai Winn thing.
Yeah,
it was really interesting to see on my, like, knowing what I know now.
Yeah, I think Kai Winn is definitely like really intuitive and intellectual as a character.
Yeah,
you know, when you say about like how she says things with a smile, like she's very manipulative, perhaps not the best way, like a politician, basically, which she
kind of is. Like
exactly
a religious politician.
One. Yeah, but she is still in a position of authority, which is a core part of her character, and she holds herself with that authority, whether or not she actually has it. And because she comes across as like knowing what she's talking about or having this power, you believe that she does. I can definitely see how she would be a really effective schemer in Bajor, definitely.
I also like how you brought up how she was like, she'll act like she has this power when she doesn't. When she is Vedic Winn, and she's like talking to Bareil and Kira and everyone like that, it's almost exactly the same as how she acts as when she's Kai. Because she's like, oh, did you get permission from the council to do stuff with the orb? And Vedic Bareil is like, you don't really need to do that. And she's like, well, I do it just as a courtesy.
Yeah.
It's like she's gotten, it's like she's pointing a finger at him. Like he got in trouble for something that he wouldn't get in trouble for anyway.
Caught him with his hand in the cookie jar.
Yeah. But the cookie jar is empty to begin with.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I have to say, Jara, I think,
Jara.
on Facebook, saying that Louise Fletcher described her as Margaret Thatcher in space. That is absolutely brilliant.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that is definitely one of Kai Winn's more memorable moments, I guess. One that really stands out for me, and I don't think I wrote this in like our research document, but I feel like we can't go without mentioning her amazing speech in, I think it was Rapture. It was in Rapture, when she's talking to Major Kira, and she's doing this whole speech about, you know, everyone in the resistance, you know, thinks you're the only ones who suffered or the only ones who did anything, but I
was doing stuff too.
Yeah, she was. I was in a prison camp for years, and I was abused, and I suffered, and I worked to do my hardest to uproot the Cardassian regime. You know, she makes the point that Kira had her weapons and like her allies in the resistance, whereas Kai Winn only had her faith to and like her bravery or courage, I think is the word she actually uses. And the way she just finishes it off with, walk with the prophets, my child. I know I will. I was like, yes. But yeah, that's another brilliant example of how Kai Winn really utilized her way with words and her understanding of her audience as well. Like, she was definitely able to adapt herself to her situation, who she was with, to say the right thing in order to get the result that she wanted. Yeah, she could deliver a blow to pretty much anyone, I think.
Yeah. And I'm glad you brought up that speech too, because like, I think it's also kind of the moment that kind of like Susan Theme on YouTube said that even the villains are complex people, just like the heroes. I think that was one of the moments where I was like, even if, like, I'm sure she knows she's being ambitious in some fashion, but she's not evil. Like, I think that's one of the times where I don't entirely get some of the people comparing her to Ducat, is because she's not like him in that sense. She does these things, I guess, the wrong things for the right reasons. And when she explains herself like she does then, it almost comes off as like good. Like, I'm trying to find, like, she's not evil is essentially what I'm saying. And I think that makes her a really cool villain, is that she's not like Ducat, and she's not evil, and she doesn't have, like, the only time that she really does have that moment, like how Ducat has his moment in Waltz. I think it's Waltz. Where he kind of has his breaking point. She has her own, but it's much, much later. And it, like, yeah, like Robin said on YouTube, it feels like her evil nature comes from a relatable source.
Yeah, I think something that's interesting when it comes to Kai Winn is to try and view it from her perspective. And I know that's like a good thing to do with any character. It's interesting and you learn a lot more about them. But specifically with Kai Winn, if we're looking at the situation from her point of view, she comes across as having the belief that Bajoran society needs to remain loyal and dedicated and devoted to the prophets, and the Federation is serving as this outside secular organization. You know, Bajor has only just reclaimed itself. They have only just escaped one oppressive regime from the Cardassians, and here comes the Federation and humans in this specific context, but you know, non-profit worshipping people, and she's doing what she feels she needs to in order to preserve that. You know, they nearly had everything taken away from them. Many of them did. They suffered for being Bajorans. They suffered for having their beliefs, and everything was snatched away from them. Kai Winn at least comes across as if she's trying to protect that, and all of her actions can be linked back to that. She is trying to perpetuate the continued growth and safety of Bajoran culture.
Yeah. And like she wants to have the freedom for Bajorans to follow their traditional ways as they have before, but now she's having to deal with the Federation, who, in all honesty, sometimes tries to also take away this kind of individuality that some species has. I won't go into the morality of the Federation as a whole, but
we'd be here a while.
Yeah, but I mean, the Federation is also the same people who told Rolaren to take off her religious earring. So, like, we have to take that into account, especially when we talk about Kai Winn not really wanting to work with the Federation.
Yeah, I think it serves us well as much as it serves Kai Winn's character well to frame it in context.
I'm sorry, I read Robin on YouTube saying Federation rides with gentrification.
You know, I'm like, you're not wrong.
Not wrong. But like, I think a lot, like, basically to go back, I think all that stuff as a whole is what makes Kai Winn like so complex, so interesting, and a villain, really, because she's not wanting to work with the Federation, wanting to go back to tradition. And I think that's why she gets such a bad rap, is because, like, religion as a whole, at least from what I've seen, what I've dealt with, isn't like too welcome in fandom spaces, particularly Christianity, just because, you know, Christians, and Christianity and the Bajoran religion kind of mirror each other for the most part. I think you could get more arguments that they are, it could be another religion, but I'm just going to go with Christianity for the sake of my argument. I think part of the reason that she's not as well liked as Dukat or any of the other like big bad DS9 villains is because she's a religious figure, and that's just not as interesting to people, or like not as well liked as someone who is just evil and charismatic. Like, she's charismatic. Yeah. She has all these things that people like in Dukat that I enjoy seeing in Dukat. His charisma, his sarcasm, his like just way of walking and talking. Like, she does all of those things, but she is a religious figure, a high-ranking religious figure.
Yeah, she represents maybe an oppressive and maybe repressive frame of view. Whether that's warranted or not, that is how it can be perceived. And I do think it's worth exploring the fact that when it comes to Kai Winn, but Bajoran religion in general, like, the prophets do exist.
Yes. Yes.
Like, you can argue about their form, their purpose, the fact that they're not, you know, confirmed deities, but they do quite literally exist. Yes, they may experience time and dimensions differently to humanoids, and their physical powers are completely different, but they do exist. Winn and the other very orthodox Bajorans who worship the prophets may interpret their existence in a different way to perhaps members of the Federation or the Cardassians or even us as the viewers, but they haven't been going around preaching about a non-existent or unproven entity. Like, they do exist, and they've had interactions and contact. I mean, the emissary, in this case in the form of Cisco, is like an established role. There is an actual system of prophets, which I think is worth reminding ourselves of when it comes to the discussion of religion in Star Trek.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's perhaps where some of the parallels between religions and cultures that we have here on Earth in the present times differ perhaps in that. But yeah, I think from Kai Winn's point of view, like, this is very confirmed and solid in her mind that the prophets do exist, and she's not unfounded in that.
Yeah. And like, I did like Susan Theme's comment as well about Dukat. Could it be that a lot of the other propaganda we see in day-to-day life glorifies the military, and is that possibly why Dukat is more liked?
That is a brilliant point.
Yeah. I don't think I ever thought of it like that, because I'm so used to, I'm like, that's another thing with Kai Winn. I'm used to seeing her as her religion almost, because it's so much of her character. But I forget that Dukat is such a militarized character sometimes, just because of some of the stuff that he does and how much time he has to explore other parts of his character that Kai Winn doesn't get.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I think it's especially worth reflecting perhaps on the fact that Deep Space Nine was such a politically reflective series, given, you know, not only the context in terms of what was going on during Earth when it was actually aired, but yeah, you know, within the show, you know, you've got episodes like in the Pale Moonlight, and you know, it was definitely a more politically active and politically involved series. So yeah, picking up on the way that Dukat is presented as a very militarized character is really interesting. I hadn't actually thought of that, so
yeah. Like, yes, thank you. Like, and I hate doing this because I've also brought this up with in the Pulaski episode, but I feel like it needs mentioned every single time we do a female character, is that I think part of the reason that she's so underwritten, in my opinion, underwritten, kind of underwhelming compared to, I'm always going to have her in comparison to Dukat, just because there's, you know,
they're very interconnected.
The reason that she comes off as so underwritten, underutilized, is part of it is probably because she's a woman. Like sorry.
No. Continue.
But like I said in my Pulaski episode, a lot of the Star Trek writers, Rick Berman, like,
no swearing on stream.
They don't tend to like keep a good handle on their female characters, like a good sort of like kind of keeping them consistent.
They are, presented in a certain way, and then the audience gives a lot more liberties, I think, to male characters who are morally ambiguous at best and corrupt at worst. But Rose on YouTube actually makes a brilliant point that you know, when we're talking about how Kai Winn's religion can be seen as similar to Christianity, there is, of course, a long-standing history of oppression and colonization.
Yes.
And that is absolutely brilliant to bring up. Especially given the rest of the political nature of DS9, I think it does really help to frame it in that context. I was going somewhere with that, and I've now forgotten. But it's interesting the parallels that then has within the show as well. You know, with the Cardassian regime oppressing and trying to take over Bajor and setting up those labor camps, and the very long list of terrible, horrific, colonial inspired things that they do. It is so interconnected, but really interesting to bring up, definitely.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting that they chose to have such an oppressed species like the Bajorans have such a Christian religion. It's like almost completely opposite of each other.
And then, of course, when it comes to parallels between Bajorans and the Christian faith, again, I think another prime example of that is when you have Kai Winn visiting the Deep Space Nine station and seeing that science-based subjects were being taught in like the little school that was being run, and you know, demanding that the teachings of the prophets needs to be on the curriculum, not science. And of course that very closely parallels the teaching of evolution and Darwinism within schools.
Versus creationism.
Yes. So, which is, of course, a lot more, I guess, instantly relatable to some people, especially given how recent and especially how prominent that was, you know, going back to when Deep Space Nine was airing. I
mean, that was still a thing when I was a kid back in the early 2000s. So it almost beat it to the punch a little bit. Not completely, obviously, but like just and just having that as her introduction episode 2 just really solidified that this is what we want the Bajoran religion to be. Is this is space Christianity?
Yeah. Once again, I think it shows that science fiction is at its best when it references not only historical things that we've experienced in humanity's lifetime, but things that are going on at the time of the show being aired, and that the audience can really relate to and use the show as a ground to explore the narratives and themes that we experience in real life. But whilst we're on the subject of Kai Winn and her seemingly steadfast religion, something I did want to kind of delve into is, although her main motivations are presented as her devotion and dedication to the Bajoran faith, and I'm not questioning the validity of her beliefs. I do believe. Yes, I do believe that she was deeply religious and did wholeheartedly follow the teaching of the prophets. But I think that her main character traits, her main motivations, was not her religion, but rather her ambition and her thirst for power. I think whilst maybe her religious beliefs informed her decisions, they weren't her primary motivations. She uses her religious beliefs and her status as a religious leader. She utilizes them, maybe even perhaps weaponizes these convictions as a way to ensure her power within society, be that Bajoran or within the Federation itself, and using that as a way to continue her power and not just let it be taken over again. She's greedy for power and status and influence, and those traits in and of themselves are not bad things. I think is worth to point out. Lots of people have ambition. Ambition is a powerful driver. And you see it in so many other Star Trek characters, even the good ones that we love and adore. But I think that is definitely her core driving powers. She, going back to how Sisko represents a secular challenge to the more ecclesiastical side of Bajor, he also presents a direct challenge to Kai Winn and her status. Here is a man born and raised on Earth who doesn't or didn't believe in the prophets and didn't grow up following that religion. And he is the one that the prophets chose as emissary, not Kai Winn, not even another devout Bajoran, but a man, a human from the Federation. He was the one deemed worthy, if you will, and then was given the status that being emissary and the respect that grants one. And I think, it reflects her rejection from the prophets as well. It's worth pointing out that through all of these years of servitude, through being imprisoned in the Cardassian labor camps and suffering because of her beliefs, as many other Bajorans did, she was never contacted by the prophets. She was never granted their wisdom, their respect, and that had to sting. That had to really sting. And then to have Federation man walk in must have been like rubbing salt in the wound.
I'm sorry, when you said Federation man, it just made me think of like Sisko in a like Federation themed Superman suit.
Sisko needs you, man. I think in response to not having that status, Winn then uses her infamy as a religious leader to capture the loyalty and respect from other Bajorans who maybe also had become a bit disillusioned with the Federation, seeing as they were just freeing themselves, their society, from the Cardassian occupation. She uses her status as a religious leader to gain their loyalty and their respect. She's basically saying, follow me and you're saving our teachings, you're saving our way of life. Elect me as Kai and you're saving our society. Your status as a devout Bajoran and Bajor itself, essentially, it is especially framed against the context of the Cardassian occupation. So I do really think that it's worth exploring that, though her religion, I believe, is completely sincere, I also think she weaponizes it, which, again, you can have your own opinions on the good or bad nature of that, but it's definitely what makes her a more interesting, multifaceted character.
Yeah, and I think the finale is really what drives home the kind of, religion is one of her big motivators, but ambition can go beyond that, because she completely, as soon as she's like, the prophets are not with me, she moves on to the paw race, who are willing to help her get these things that she wants.
Yeah, I find it very amusing, or perhaps just ironic, I think, is the one moment that Kai Winn is granted an audience with the prophets after all of this service. She's not given their respect. She's not applauded. She's not thanked or recognized. She was completely dismissed. And instead, the prophets decided that Dukat, a Cardassian, leader of a regime that had just imprisoned and tortured Bajorans for their faith, they chose him to act as their vessel. And it was that kind of rebuffal, that concrete and definite rejection from her deities, who she did have such a devotion for. That's what made her change her tune. You can argue that maybe that just showed her the error of her ways, and she really did genuinely want to do right. But I think it's incredibly telling that it, her quest for power, her status drive, that is what really guided her actions towards the end. And overall, what kind of led to the resolution of Deep Space Nine as a series, and that entire plot line, like her ambition and her deep want for loyalty and recognition, that is so tied to the result of Deep Space Nine in general. So yeah, she is a lot more complex than her angry religious lady.
Yeah. It's like they probably could have just left her as that. She's just the angry religious lady that comes onto the show sometimes. I mean, like, but they didn't, and I'm really glad that they didn't, because even though I did, sorry, I think I bumped my mic, but even though I did like kind of be like, yeah, Star Trek doesn't like to write women very well, I still think Deep Space Nine is some of the more well-written women, and I think Kai Winn is one of those pretty well-written women. It's like, as much as I think she underutilized, underwritten, same thing I already said, like she up until the end is kept pretty much in line with the things that she says earlier on and the things that she does. Because, I mean, like I said, not in the hands of the prophets, the circle, I said that seemed like a parallel to her conversations with Dukat near the end. And another thing that I was thinking of while we were talking about like her like switching religions very suddenly, it reminds me of something that someone said, like, not to get IRL political, but like a lot of people who believe in something for a very, very long time and put all of their energy into something for a very, very long time, and then they find out that the thing they were believing in is not correct, or like something's wrong with what they were thinking. One of two things is going to happen, or at least this is the theory that I read. One of two things is going to happen with these people. Either they are going to break down and have to rethink literally everything that they've ever thought of about that thing, or they're gonna flip switches and they are going to take all of that energy that they had for that one thing completely, immediately take that solidified years over years energy, put it into something else. And that's exactly what she did when she turned from the prophets to the power race, is that she was immediately just on board. I believe in these people because they're right. They've always been right. I was wrong. They were always right. And she said that with her whole chest the entire time, right up until her death.
Yeah, definitely. I think X High on YouTube, hello, has made a really interesting point, that the way that Kai Winn uses religion for her own gain, is the only way I can put it, really. Again, definitely references the very real life applications we see of religion. Not all the time, of course, I'm not saying that, but it can definitely be used to manipulate and control people, actions, groups, societies. So again, having that makes her an effective character. I think, we mentioned how, despite only being in 14 episodes, she has had such a deep impact on the audience. I mean, we're talking about her now, a whole hour-long episode about a character who wasn't really in it for that long. So yeah, again, I think it's just really interesting to see how the writers and the producers, maybe not intentionally, who knows, but they did manage to reference so many key themes that made Deep Space Nine such like an intensely thought-provoking and developed show that still holds up and has applications to society today.
Yeah, like I just wish it wasn't so easy to compare her to Ducat. I wish there was. I don't even know in what way they would be able to do this, but I just wish they were able to differentiate them just a little more. I think the way that I'm thinking of it is that they are so different that they're the same, and that's why they worked together at the end. It like. I just wish I had a better way of explaining that, how I think they're so similar, but they're so different. And I wish there was just something else to add in there that makes them more individual instead of just Ducat and then Kai Winn. Like,
I think being able to reflect on the complexities of Kai Winn's actions in terms of her motivations and how layered they are for her as well. Like I don't for a second mean to cast doubt on the validity or sincerity of her beliefs. It's just how she uses them for her real heart's desire. I think that kind of makes her perhaps more developed than Ducat, but as Robin on YouTube has pointed out, Deep Space Nine does a really good job of balancing these really well-developed characters out, because as complex as Kai Winn may be, she is still serving in a negative role, or at least an opposing role in Deep Space Nine. And because of the religious elements to her character. It could very easily have become just about that, and been about the Bajoran religion in general. But they did have the characters such as Kira and Baral that weren't, this really oppressive force, and really did use that to guide their actions in a way that perhaps felt more genuine, or at least genuine to them. So yeah, again, Deep Space Nine is just chef's kiss most of the time.
Good stuff.
Most of the time, yeah.
And I love Kira being brought up for it as a comparison too, because I don't forget that she's like follows this faith, but there's just so much to her that like her faith, it doesn't necessarily come second, but it's like not at the forefront of my mind when I think of Kira.
Yeah. I mean, you brought up Rolaren earlier. I mean, one of the most, I don't want to say defining features of her, but one of the most memorable moments in her short, brief plot line, bring her back, was the moment when she was told that she wasn't allowed to wear her earring because it wasn't uniform standard. Yeah. Once again, yes. Yeah, that was one of her most memorable moments. Whereas Kira, as you point out, is a lot more fleshed out as a character, and again, a large part of that is going to be because Kira was in a lot more episodes than both Kai Winn and Rolaren
combined.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, to be fair, just on the addition of Rolaren, like Kira was supposed to be Rolaren, but considering writers' rights and how Mr. Rick Berman didn't want to. I don't know if it was specifically Rick Berman. I won't put all the blame on him, but
you might not.
They didn't want to get the rights for Rolaren, or at least that's what I've been told. They didn't want to get the rights for Rolaren from the writer, so they just made Rolaren 2.
Yeah, kind of.
I think the actress also didn't want to be in it.
Yeah,
I think that was part of it.
Saw the kind of Rolaren archetype character and thought, I like this. I think people will like this. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, season theme. Michelle Forbes, I think, also turned them down. So,
the political
either way, it's
nature of the behind the scenes stuff is
that's show business.
Yes,
she did turn it down. Okay, yeah. I do
fair enough.
Am I thinking of another character then? Because I thought there was also something with how the writers wanted a character to be in it, and then like didn't. Or no, the showrunners wanted the character to be in it, and then they found out the writers had rights, and then they didn't put him in. It might have been another character. I don't remember, but we're not talking about that. Tom Paris. Oh, yeah. Okay, I was thinking of Tom Paris. You're right. Anyway.
No, but it is interesting to draw parallels between Kira and Rolaren because they are very similar in terms of their abrasive, or strong, independent female character type.
Girl boss.
Yeah, they do serve kind of the same. I don't want to say same purpose, but the same kind of role that you often see characters, especially women, divided into like these neat categories, and they are very similar.
I think that's another one that kind of works for Kai Winn, is that she doesn't fall into like the kind of normal like female character archetypes that you always see. Like, oh, there's tough girl who don't need no man. There's soft girl, damsel in distress. Like there's those types of characters, but Kai Winn doesn't. Now that I'm thinking about it, I don't feel like she falls into really any of those. I think she comes off as a lot more like fleshed out than that.
And I think part of it perhaps is that there aren't really that many explorations of other Bajoran women in Deep Space Nine that I can really remember. There's Kira, obviously briefly Rolaren. Really the only kind of main one. Someone let me know if I'm forgetting someone. Really obvious, but to my memory anyway, she's kind of one of the only others. So having that dichotomy between the two maybe
it helps.
Does make her feel kind of more fleshed out, not necessarily because she is. Lita. Yes.
Lita, yes.
Brilliant. Thank you. Yeah.
My love.
Yeah. Again, that was like they are very different in terms of the roles and parts that they play. So it does kind of give you that difference. So we've got a few minutes left. Shall we
we've had
start winding down?
Wrapping it up.
Yeah.
So
to conclude our TED Talk, Kai Winn is a lot more of a layered and complex character that is often seen as just mean religious lady who doesn't like fun and does some weird stuff and then teams up with Dukat and then doesn't, and whilst parts of that are true, yes,
is like onions.
Yes, thank you. Kai Winn is onions. She has a lot more interesting motivations that make her not only interesting as a character, but also as a direct difference to Dukat, who she is often compared to. And I think she serves as a really interesting character to be able to explore some of the themes that we mentioned, especially around religion and our own personal experiences with it, especially given the time that Deep Space Nine was airing. And she deserves more credit, basically. Not saying that you have to like her, because she does do some not great stuff. But she's a lot more of an interesting character than people give her credit for.
Absolutely. So we've got like a minute left. So
before we do like our full wrap up, I just wanted to shout out, I know some people liked my shirt and my flag. I'm gonna plug some people. The shirt is courtesy of Deep Space 90s. If anyone wants to look their stuff up, they have really cool stuff. I could empty my bank account quite easily. And of course, my beautiful, glorious flag is from Admiral Bombwater on Twitter. You can find them at Ryu Hayu, which is at RAIJUTHEHYEJU on Twitter. Get yourself this cool rainbow flag if you want that.
All right. And thank you guys for joining us. We have about like 15, 20 seconds left. So,
yeah, you can find us on Twitter and on Twitch and YouTube. Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you to Women at Warp for hosting such an amazing festival.